So in the 13th century, there was a custom house on the Wisła River. It was located at the intersection of the river and the land trade route, because this was a very important part of commerce. Kazimierz was of the commerce of medieval times in Poland. Traffic moved up and down the river, the Wisła, which is here, looking very blue and mighty on a day like this. Wheat was the main, and other grains were the main exchange. So Kazimierz grew in popularity. In order to keep the city safe, a castle, a tower and a castle had to be built. And these were built by the king called Kazimierz the Great. Kazimierz the Great was quite a piece of work. This fellow loved nothing better than building castles. This is only one example, and by far it is not the largest. In fact, he built a whole series of castles between Krakow, the Wawel Castle, all the way to Częstochowa, forming a line of demarcation, if you will, protected by 10 or 12 castles, stretching across the bottom of the Świętokrzyski, or the Holy Cross province. This was incredibly important to stabilizing the growth of Poland. At the same time that this was going on, Kazimierz allowed a growing immigration of Jewish people from all over, Jewish merchants particularly, but not just Jewish merchants, also scholars and the like. But we'll talk about that more in a later section, because the Jewish contribution to Kazimierz is unparalleled and extremely important to talk about. The stone watchtower, which is beyond the castle, was erected in the 13th century. The castle itself, castle proper, was built a bit later. The center of the settlement was down the hill in front of me now. So the castle is commanding the view of the river, keeping trade safe. It would be very difficult to take this castle at this time. So at the beginning of the 14th century, with the castle securing the power of the area and protecting the routes, you have the growing market. The entire area of the town, and the market you saw in a previous episode, and we'll go back to it and see some more of it, began to expand. And it expanded along the river to where the granaries are. It expanded the other way along the river, and there were crossings with small boats that went across, carrying animals, food, grain, people, whatever needed to go across. The people of Kazimierz Dolny were basically engaged in farming and making beer, and they were building, creating buildings, so you had masons and everybody necessary for that. So this gives you some feeling for what the city was like. It was a growing center of grain export all around Europe and up and down the Wisła, to Krakow that way, to Gdansk, several hundred kilometers to the north. And in order to secure that, the king, Kazimierz, for whom the place is named, had to build this castle behind us, which is a fine example of a 1300s castle, 1300s. Okay, so let's go up and have a closer look at the castle now. Why not? We're here. Come on, let's go. The backbone of commerce and defense, the castle guarded the river valley and ensured the smooth passage of goods from Krakow to Gdansk, also known as Danzig, the Hanseatic port on the Baltic Sea. The castle was an essential ingredient of medieval life, providing a strong point of last defense in case of attack. Let's take a look. I don't know about you, but if I were a king or I were a general, this is a place I would love to have my castle, because it is really, as I said before, controlling the whole basin of the Wisła here. Both north and back in this direction, south, past Janowitz and the other later castle, Renaissance castle, you have the prime position. Now, if you look behind me and you see this castle keep, this tower here, this was the first building that I alluded to before, built in the 1300s. This is a later construction that we're in now. The castle is a much later construction, 100 years or so, and then gradually modified until it was destroyed in the let's say the mid-1600s by the Swedish invasion, which is known as the potop to Poles, and is in English called the deluge. So the Swedish swept through Poland, and even strong points like this, could not resist. And the wheat trade was then destroyed at that point in the mid-1600s. So the beginning, right here, we can see the beginning of the trade in Kazimierz started with this castle keep, organized by Kazimierz the Great. Kazimierz Wielki, that's his name. He's a very important man. If you read about nothing else, read about him. If you understand the origins of real Polish power that led to the establishment of the Polish-Lithuanian kingdom later, the real foundations are here, creating and protecting the Polish state. And also commerce. At one time, there were 60, 70 grain silos, big brick, large buildings containing grain, operating all along this riverfront, right under the watchful eyes of the castle keep and the castle itself here. So you can't get much more strategic than this. Kazimierz always knew where to put, he would always find a good promontory to put his castles. And he kept Poland safe and allowed it to grow for several hundred years after his passing. And well, there we are. Let's take a walk around and look at some of the images from the castle, okay? Let's do that now. Poland Daily. Stay with us for the next exciting part of our visit to Kazimierz Dolny, one of the most beautiful cities, not only in Poland, or we say villages, not only in Poland, but in Europe itself. Okay, stick with us.